I had the fortune to be at that October Motor Show at Earls Court that year. So it was the first UK motor show which the car had appeared. And we were besieged in our little store where we handed out the leaflets and so on. We were trapped. The crowds surged around the thing and would stay. It wasn't a matter of people coming and going. The throng got bigger. It was a great sensation.
.9600HP is probably the most famous E-Type of all. The reason for that is that this was the car that Jaguar used to get its maximum speed test runs. It took the car out onto a Belgian motorway and shot it along at a genuine 150 miles an hour, and it was that speed that captured the public imagination and of the motoring press. But of course, something that nobody knew at the time, well, the press knew but they weren't letting on, was the fact that 9600HP had been specially doctored and lightened to get to that top speed. The production cars wouldn't quite do it. But Jaguar was learning, well, more than a few things about publicity at the time. In fact, it would use the car for almost any purposes to get a publicity shot.
At a garage in London's West End, Stirling Moss drives in to inaugurate a device every motorist will welcome. A car cleaning installation that'll make a car spotless in 3 to 5 minutes. At full capacity, it can turn out one clean car every 15 seconds. Cost of the installation, over £25,000. And Stirling takes over his car as bright as a showroom model. Tell you the truth, we thought it looked clean to start with, but that's hardly the machine's fault.
To me, if you look at the advertising, what we had here was a car that was developed from the D-Type racing car. All that race heritage of Jaguar and quality build and small production. And they'd built a 150 mile an hour supercar. And it seemed from the advertising, which sort of featured lots of worthy copy, was an initial worry that people wouldn't pick up on this car unless you could justify for its existence. Supercars tend not to need any justification at all. If a brief for the E-Type landed on my desk with all its racing heritage, the only thing you'd have to put on it is some line that summed up the car and its race heritage, and nothing else, probably a line of copy where you could actually buy it and how much it'd cost you, and that would be it.
The E-Type was such a fast car, so glamorous, so sexy, that I think there were quite a lot of people in the media, the establishment, who didn't trust it. It was a feeling that this was letting freedom go too far, rather like letting Lady Chatterley's Lover be published. It had that kind of feel about it, the E-Type. And there were people that were saying, we're not going to have ordinary people driving around at these Ferrari Stirling Moss speeds. It was a dangerous symbol, a real symbol of the future that was coming.
Here was a car capable of 150 miles an hour. Putting it into context, the average saloon car then had a maximum speed perhaps of half that, absolute maximum speed. And we were running things like side valve Morrises and so on that wouldn't achieve 60 miles an hour.
The Jaguar is a special breed of cat, more powerful than a leopard and really wild. Jaguar is a special breed of car. They're available at local dealers everywhere, in every state of the Union. Jaguars, they're really wild.
The Americans understood the E-Type instinctively. They saw it as a beautiful little high-speed toy. They knew it was a sexy little star, and they treated it like that. I think the British had a very confused attitude towards the E-Type. If you look at very early programmes and films and publicity in Britain, you see this lovely, glamorous car being driven by people in flat caps and pipes and tweed jackets. I think the British thought it was, when they're actually on the road, they were back in a Triumph TR2 or an MGTC from just the immediate post-war period. I think they misunderstood it.
We chose Cannes in the south of France for our delivery.
The skipper of the Quest saw his new Jaguar for the first time, thousands of miles from where he gave the original order to a Beverly Hills dealer. But everything was on schedule. The packet from Jaguar contained insurance papers and everything required to cross international borders.
suppose the E-Type in America could be described as the first real fashion accessory. It was a social statement. I mean, it wasn't very comfortable compared to sort of Cadillacs. It had no air conditioning compared to Cadillacs at the time. But what it did have was a little bit of Europe. You know, Europe was seen to have a certain amount of cachet, a certain amount of aplomb.
Saint-Tropez, the jet set's new in spot, where every girl looks like Brigitte Bardot. The XKE's stock 4.2-liter engine is a real hot iron.
It really is great to drive your own Jaguar through Europe and so easily arrange.
You'd probably drive a Cadillac to work, for example, up and down to work. It was all very comfortable. You're cocooned in your Cadillac. But you get home at 5:30 and you have to go to a barbecue. What you tended to do is drive up in your E-Type and say, "Hi, I have arrived in my E-Type. Yes, you know about Europe. Let's have some sort of conversation."
America made the E-Type, there's no doubt about it. The American press loved it. They were far more critical and intelligent than the British press at the time. They could see the car's virtues and vices, but they adored it, and so did the public that bought it.
What are you giving your son for Christmas? Well, there's always a Jaguar. Disc brakes, twin overhead camshafts, wire wheels. A really distinguished gift.
When the E-Type hit the showrooms, it cost £2,000. At that price, it simply had no real competition. The only other cars that went as fast as it did were the Aston Martin DB4 at the time and one of the big Mercedes 300s. A point about those cars, of course, they were immensely expensive. The Aston cost just about twice as much as the E-Type, and the Mercedes even more, whilst Ferraris, they cost the earth. They were like Rolex watch price compared to a Timex wristwatch. In terms of looks, of course, the Mercedes looked like a little light cruiser, a little Second World War cruiser on the road, a very tough, menacing machine. And the Aston Martin, wonderful, handcrafted, very charming, but a bit of a carriage clock, an Edwardian carriage clock on the road.
Seen the new models for 65? With the new 4.2-litre engine, the E-Type Jaguar has increased power and flexibility, but wears the same sleek body shell as previous models. Come for a trip in the surge of acceleration of a real man's motorcar.
One of the most satisfying things about driving an E-Type is the view right along the bonnet. It's like driving behind a real piece of sculpture. You see these wonderful white on black instruments with their big needles sweeping round. I think what they do, they make you feel you're flying a 50s jet fighter like a Hawker Hunter. It really does have that association.
Top speed, 150 miles an hour.
At night, it really is beautifully brought out. That's when the instruments glow, not like a modern car with brash green and orange lights, but very gently. And as you're driving along, the soft glow from the instruments, the purr from that big engine, and the very soft light from the headlamps, which actually aren't very good, gives you this experience of somehow driving both in the past and yet in some glorious frozen time which you can't quite explain. It really is the essence of sports car driving.
This sleek, bullet-shaped car is way out on its own. In setting this pace, Jaguars can look to the future with confidence, equipped with the knowledge that they have at their fingertips the resources and experience to remain permanently one leap ahead.
The Americans who so loved the E-Type in the end were responsible for killing it off. Following the Nader report, cars had to be much safer, or perceived to be much safer, and exhaust controls had to be much tighter. So these two things happened to the E-Type. One, exhaust emission controls meant that the car went progressively slower, losing its fantastic top speed performance. And secondly, safety regulations, well, what sort of safety regulations? The fact Americans couldn't park their cars in car parks without bashing into the car next to them meant that they sprouted rubber bumpers. The cars got fatter and fatter, losing their wonderful looks. Well, in the early 70s, Jaguar thought, we must do something. They felt forced to do something radical, so they shoehorned a big new V12 engine onto the bonnet and beefed up the bodywork as well. The V12 was a fast car, but it was also the end of the line. The E-Type had lost its catwalk good looks. It had become the fat cat's adrenaline pump, overweight, out of date, and on its way out. The last E-Type left the production line in 1974. It marked the end of an era. I think the lasting feeling one has of the E-Type, it was the ultimate expression of motoring freedom before all the legislation and laws came clamping down and made us drive safely and responsibly.
Next week, Without Walls asks who will win £20,000 in Britain's most prestigious modern art award. That's the 1992 Turner Prize. The candidates, their critics and their chances on Without Walls next Tuesday at 9.